Oh my goodness. Okay. I am back. I had to leave to get some water. Because we're going to need some water. Because we're reading part 2. And oh, look at that. I put this. My old sticky note. My only sticky note I had. Now I have many of them around my room. But yeah, we left off over here, I guess. Now, if I remember correctly, let me just reread and figure out where we left off. Because it's been a minute since we've read. Listen, now I know you guys wanted me to do a custom, but like, I realized I was like, okay, I don't have any good customs to do on stream, so we'll just read. Let's see, where can we leave off last? Okay, so we left off probably down here. Oh, we still got a lot to go. Man, we still have a lot to go. No! Quit. What's up? Got some new people I've never seen before on stream. Okay, so where we left off was this is the first book of Fetch, the second FNAF FAZBEAR Frights book. Can you guys hear my TV? You can hear my TV? Okay. Let me turn it down a little bit. Hold on. Okay. I had to turn on my TV. Can you guys hear it now? Okay. So we're gonna get back into Fetch. Hopefully finish it. But this is the first story in the second book of FAZBEAR Frights. And where did we leave off? Okay, so basically the main guy, the main character's name is Greg, and he persuaded his friends to go into a we all know it's Freddy Fazbear's, guys. He persuaded his friends to go into a Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria, an abandoned one, and they found an animatronic dog, basically. And so he went home, and then he found out his cool uncle's there. We learned he doesn't have a really good relationship with his dad. Thanks. My voice does not sound good at the moment. Allergies. Okay. So through here, he's complaining. So on this page, he's basically texting his friends. He's complaining about how he looks, basically. And so he's also trying to figure out what the 0 point field is, which is like a, it has something to do with technology or something, so. Let's hop into it. Let's move my... Oh, thank you. My nails are unpainted, guys. I've been working on customs, and I can't repaint them because I have, like, a boo-boo right there. Like, I cut my finger right there when I was working on my, Withered Freddy custom. So, ouch. He's staring at y'all. He's watching. He's watching chat. Wave to him. There we go. Okay, so we're down here. My nails are so ugly. The storm hung around the other day, but it fizzled out late Sunday night. Power came back on. School was in session as usual Monday morning. Greg endured the first half of the day and was relieved when 1:10 p.m. finally rolled around and he got to go to Advanced Scientific Theory. Advanced Scientific Theory was an AP class reserved for freshmen who had won science fair prizes in the previous 2 years. So these guys are freshmen. The class only had 12 students. It was taught by a visiting teacher, Mr. Jacoby, who also taught at Grays Harbor Community College. As always, Greg was the first one in the classroom. He sat in the front. Only Hattie would sit near him. Hattie is one of his friends, by the way. I forgot what his friends' names are, but I know one of them, I think Hattie and Brody? We'll find out. Mr. Jacoby was practically bouncing at the front of the yellow-walled classroom when the bell rang. Tall and lanky, but so full of energy, he reminded Greg of a long, coiled spring. Mr. Jacoby was an enthusiastic teacher who was undaunted by, oh man, these are big words, who was undaunted by disinterested students. Greg loved science, all science, not just tech. His passion had earned him the title of teacher's pet. One of those ones. Mr. Jacoby always lectured while darting around the front of the classroom like he always had bugs in his pants. Sometimes he scribbled on the whiteboard. Most often he just rambled. It was interesting stuff. This small room filled with tall wooden lab tables, tablets, and counter height chairs was one of Greg's favorite places in the school. He loved the periodic table and the constellation posters on the walls. He loved the smell of the fertilizer that fed the hybrid plants growing in the back of the room. It made him think of science and learning. Running a hand through unruly red hair, Mr. Jacoby began. In quantum physics, there is something known as the zero-point field. Hold on. Oh, he fell. We're up here now. The zero-point field. This field is scientific proof that there is no such thing as a vacuum. No such thing as nothingness. If you empty all space of matter and energy, you still find, in subatomic terms, a bunch of activity. This constant activity is the field of energy that is always in motion, subatomic matter constantly interacting with each other, subatomic matter. Oh my gosh. Big brain words. Oh, this is... I just now looked at chat. This is Fetch. It's a FNAF book. This is the second book of the Five Nights at Freddy's FAZBEAR FRIGHTS books. But I'm doing a second part on it. Mr. Jacoby rubbed a freckled nose. Are you all with me? Greg nodded enthusiastically. Hattie, who sat next to him at the three-person lab table, nudged him. Hey, this is your shtick? I have no idea what that says. Greg ignored him. Mr. Jacoby grinned at Greg and took his nod to represent the entire class, which was unwise, but Greg was fine with it. Good, Mr. Jacoby continued. So this energy is called the 0-point field because oh my goodness, fluctuations in the field are still found in temperatures of absolute zero. Absolute zero is the lowest possible energy state, where everything's been removed and there should be nothing remaining to make any motion. Make any sense? Greg nodded again. Great. So the energy should be zero, but then they measure the energy mathematically and it never reaches zero. There's always some remaining vibration due to continued particle exchange. Still with me? Greg nodded enthusiastically. He had no idea He hadn't had no idea Mr. Jacoby was going to talk about this today. What were the odds? He grinned. There were no odds. It was the field. He was so excited that he missed the next few minutes of Mr. Jacoby's lecture. It didn't matter. He knew this stuff. He did tune back in, though, when Kimberly Bergstorm raised her hand. Well, he sort of tuned back in. He heard her question. Is this just a theory? He also heard... Is this just a theory? Guys? Bum, 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 bum. Okay. He also heard the start of Mr. Jacoby's answer. Not entirely. Consider the scientific trend. Before the scientific revolution. That's where Greg tuned out again. He caught up, watching Kimberly. Who wouldn't? Long, inky black hair, amazing green eyes, prettier than any model Greg had ever seen. Greg felt himself flush, and he whipped his gaze away from Kimberly before someone caught him staring. Too late. Hattie nudged him again, and then Greg looked over. Hattie made goofy goo-goo eyes at him. Greg shifted his attention back to Mr. Jacoby. Okay, hold on. I gotta take a sip of water. As usual, Greg was the last one out of the room when class was over. Mr. Jacoby smiled at him as Greg gathered his stuff, and Greg gave another thought to talking to his teacher. Then he felt his phone vibrate. Waving at Mr. Jacoby. It's so weird. Maybe it's Jacoby. Oh my goodness. It's Jacoby, not Jacoby. It's Mr. Jacoby. Yeah, this is it because I didn't finish reading it. Okay, so the teacher's name is Mr. Jacoby, not Jacoby. Try telling me you're dyslexic without telling me you're dyslexic. Yes, this is fetch. I'm so dyslexic. Okay, Jacoby. It's Jacoby. Greg pulled out his phone as he stepped into the hallway. He looked at the screen. Okay, this is what the screen says, guys. The phone number... Oh, wait. Hello, Greg. And it's, like, abbreviated. Hold on. It says, hello, Greg. How are you? The phone number wasn't familiar. Greg looked around. Who was texting him? He entered, I'm fine. Who's this? Then he watched the screen. And it says, fetch. Oh, very funny, Hattie, Greg muttered. He texted what he said. The reply wasn't what he expected. For you? What's your question? Oh wait, it says question for you. Okay. What's your question? Greg texted. Why'd you leave? Greg rolled his eyes and entered. You're hilarious. T.Y. You answer. Greg felt a tap on his shoulder. You're going to be late for Spanish, amigo, Hattie said. Greg whipped around and Hattie raised an eyebrow. Oh, Cyril. That was the other person's name. Cyril. Okay. Greg, Hattie, and Cyril, who stood next to him, took a stutter step back. Why are you texting me if you're right here, Greg? Asked Hattie. Dude, you whacked? Do I look like I'm texting you? Oh, the pages stopped. Okay. Actually, no. Hattie's phone was nowhere in sight. Greg looked back at his phone. Whoever was texting him had repeated, you answer. Greg looked at Cyril. Did you text me? No por que habra. No, I don't know why you text me and stop speaking in Spanish, Greg said. Cyril ignored him. Venga. He tugged on Greg's sleeve. I hate Spanish, Greg said. Cyril looked past Greg and said, Hola, Manuel. Greg turned to look at Manuel Gomez, who had transferred to the school a couple weeks before. Madrid, Spain? Oh no, it's a bunch of Spanish words. If you're Spanish, I'm sorry. Hola, Senra. ¿Cómo estás? Estoy bien. ¿Tú? Bueno. Bueno. Oi, Manuel. ¿Consoes a Greg? Cyril asked, gesturing at Greg. No. Manuel smiled at Greg and held out his hand. Encantada de conocerte. He just said, nice to meet you, Cyril told Greg. Lo sí, Greg said. I'm not a total Spanish spaz. Close enough, Cyril said. Manuel laughed. Here we go again. Greg, ¿tiene muchos problemas con el español? Okay. Let's see if I can translate for you guys. I took Spanish a time ago. Oh, he's saying Greg has problems in Spanish. Yep. I can totally read Spanish, guys. Okay. Cyril told Manuel. I'd be happy to help you with Spanish anytime, Manuel said to Greg. Want me to give you my number? He held out his phone. Sure. Greg swapped phones with Manuel, and they exchanged numbers. Yo, Moosey? Someone called out to Cyril. How's your mom doing? She's still a freak like you? Greg turned and faced Cyril's bully. He cleared his throat and said loudly, Remember this, Trent? 3 things in life are important. The first is to be kind, the second is to be kind, and the third is to be kind. So said Henry James. Trent shoved Greg. You're a freak. Trent sauntered away. Hattie nudged Greg. You read too much. You don't read enough. In unison, they said and exchanged deep voices. The universe is in balance. They fist bumped and finished with cha. A couple of kids in the hall deliberately jostled Greg, and one of them said, You guys are weird. And proud of it, Greg saying, Manuel touched Greg's shoulder. I like Henry James, too. He grinned and held out a fist. Greg bumped fists with Manuel, and then shoving his phone in his pocket, Greg followed Cyril and Hattie to Spanish. He wasn't going to talk to them about the text now, but he didn't stop thinking about the text either. If Hattie nor Cyril sent them, who did? Was someone else in the restaurant with the boys on Saturday night? Is that what that slamming door was, or did someone see them leave, then go and find Fetch? The idea that they've been watched made Greg's skin crawl, but the idea that they hadn't been watched made all the hairs on Greg's arms stand. How could it be? He couldn't think about it, not yet. By the next day, he was thinking about it hard. In that time, he'd received a dozen texts from Fetch. By now, he realized he had the text. The text had to be from the animatronic. They couldn't be from anyone else, because no one else could know everything Fetch was texting about. Obviously, Fetch was dialed into Greg, so to speak. It quickly became clear that Fetch was synced with Greg's phone. He was trying to live up to his name. When Greg told Cyril he needed more time to do some homework, Fetch sent Greg a link to a time management article, and a clock appeared on Greg's phone. When Greg looked up FRIGHTS online, he received a link from Fetch to an article about the latest research into intention and rigs. Then, when Greg finished the article, Fetch text a bunch of ones and zeros, binary code. This baffled Greg until he thought about the article he'd just read. The article talked about experiments being done that used REGs to measure whether a person could think hard enough to have an effective outcome on the physical world. Greg knew REGs generated random ones and zeros. Ones and zeros, Greg thought. Was it possible? Greg copied Fetch's text into binary to text converter, and sure enough, Fetch had texted "okay" in binary code. Greg shivered as he texted back, "okay." He wasn't sure it was okay at all. It was more spooky than okay. Then things got stranger. As if getting text from an old animatronic dog wasn't bizarre to begin with, one day Greg had told his mom on the phone that he was craving chocolate. She said what she always said when he mentioned candy. "Not good for you. Have an apple." Later that day, when she got home from shopping, she pulled out a chocolate bar out of the bag. "How'd this get in here?" she said in annoyance, tucking her chin-length blonde hair behind an ear. "I didn't buy this." She checked her receipt and discovered the bar was on the order she'd placed online. "Must be a glitch," she said. "I'll have to email them." When she caught Greg watching her, she said, "Well, it's your lucky day." She tossed him the bar. As he caught the candy bar, he was pretty sure he couldn't eat it yet. He was too excited. If he was right, Fetch had just fetched him a candy bar. I want a candy bar. Okay. What else could the animatronic dog do? And how was he doing it? Greg could accept barely that Fetch was synced with his phone. But Fetch wasn't synced with his mom's phone, was he? The text message continued day after day. Sometimes Greg responded just because, sometimes not. Either way, he kept a log in his journal. This was giving him important feedback for his project. A lot of his exchanges with Fetch made no sense, like the day Fetch texted DDAS. "Why would I do anything stupid?" Greg responded, "Don't know." Sometimes the texts were clear. One day, Greg texted Cyril that he was having trouble with Spanish homework. He needed a translation for "I don't know how to make banana bread without eggs or flour." Cyril didn't respond, but Fetch texted, "No sé cómo hacer pan de platanito sin huevos ni harina." Okay. Cyril didn't text back until late in the evening. When he did, his translation was the same as Fetch's. What? Was it time for Greg to tell his friends what was going on? But he decided to wait, but then came the spider. There's little stars at the end of the modem. Okay, hold on, let me take a... I had to take a sip of my water. Okay. One Saturday, a couple weeks before Christmas, Greg was taking care of Jake. This is now usual Saturday babysitting gig. Oh wait. One Saturday, a couple weeks before Christmas, Greg was home taking care of Jake. His now usual Saturday babysitting gig. Dare, or Uncle Dare, to both Greg and Jake, thanks to Dare's close friendship with Mrs. McNally, had suggested he come over with rainy day picnic, complete with yellow smiley face picnic blanket, some potted plants, rubber toy insects, and a worker basket full of created sandwiches like artichoke salad with provolone and raisins on pumpernickel and chicken and peanut butter on rye. Unfortunately, Dare knew Greg wasn't as adventurous with food as he was, so he included a couple of ordinary tuna salad sandwiches too. They set up their picnic on the living room floor, in front of the big picture window looking over the dunes and the ocean. You could barely see the ocean through the rain. One shade of gray merged with the next. Jake, 4 years old, loved the picnic, but he wasn't keen on the huge rubber spider that lurked near the edge of the picnic blanket. He was so agitated that Greg suggested they put the picnic on hold. He got 2 spatulas and made a big portion of scooping the spider and putting it in a sealed plastic bag. That was enough for Jake. Out! He demanded, pointing a chubby finger towards the door. So Greg put on his raincoat and went out into the rain, while Dare and Jake supervised from under the shelter of the house. Greg dug a hole in the mud and buried the rubber spider. Okay, I'll have to check it out here in a minute. I at least want to get halfway through this, guys. I have my phone plugged in too, so. Jake's satisfied. Jake ate the rest of his picnic lunch without comment. Good job, boyo, Dare said. Greg enjoyed the praise. He sure never got any from his dad, who, as usual, was working. When Dare was around, though, he didn't seem to mind his father's disapproval as much. His uncle made everything seem better. A couple days before Christmas, Greg and Hattie were talking on the phone about Trent. He's such a jerk, Greg said. He laid on his bed, watching his plants, sending specific thoughts to them like one of them might send to an REG. Just like in Cleve Baxter's experiments, his plants seemed to be responding well to his latest intentions. I don't really pay attention to him, Hattie said, but I know he freaks out Cyril. Yeah, he needs to be pranked, Hattie said. I was thinking spiders. I overheard him the other day telling Zach that he's afraid of spiders. Craig laughed. Seriously? I've got a rubber one buried in my backyard. Maybe if the rain stops, I'll dig it up before I come over. Yeah, do that. Ho, ho, ho. It'd make a nice surprise in his stocking. Greg waited a few hours, but the rain didn't let up. It thundered relentlessly on the roof. If Greg hadn't promised Hattie he'd go over to wrap presents, he wouldn't have left the house. But he promised, so he geared up for the rain and stepped outside. He almost screamed when he looked down and saw a huge spider covering the well of welcome friends on his mother's jute doormat. Jumping back, he stared at the spider, now realizing now what it was. Greg felt his pulse accelerate. This was not possible. But there it was. It was the rubber spider he'd buried, still in its now muddy plastic bag. No one except Dare and Jake knew where that spider was. Jake and his family had gone to Hawaii for Christmas, and Dare was on a ski trip with friends. "Wish you could be here for our white Christmas, boyo," Dare had said on the phone the night before. Leaning over and picking up the plastic bag by the corner, as if it was a deadly creature in of itself, Greg held the bag in front of his face. Were those teeth markings along the bottom edge? He dropped the bag. His phone buzzed. He sucked his breath and fumbled for his phone. "Merry Xmas. Merry Christmas to you too, Fetch." Greg entered while trying to ignore the fact that his fingers were trembling. Okay. He didn't wait for a reply, ignoring the urge to throw the phone into the shrubs at the edge of his yard. He shoved it back in his pocket. It was time. He had to talk to his friends. The day after Christmas, the boys gathered in Greg's room on the bed. Greg sat with his back against the navy blue cushioned headboard. His friends sprawled next to each other at the foot. He glanced around the room, taking comfort in his familiar surroundings. Posters of movie musicals, altered with puppy posters on the walls. 2 shelving units stuffed with books, flacked at the window that looked out towards the ocean. The gray sky was matte gray, as if an artist with no sense of depth had just slathered paint across the horizon. On the wall opposite of the window, his plants sat in rows on shelving under a low-hanging bank of glow lights. His antique roll-top desk, a gift from Dare, sat next to the door. A plate of gingerbread cookies Greg had baked 2 days before sat in the middle of the bed. Grabbing a cookie, Hattie said, "What's this urgent meeting about?" "Yeah," Cyril squeaked. I was going to go to the day after Christmas sales with my mom." Hattie shook his head. "Seriously, dude, do you listen to yourself? You might as well wear a t-shirt that says, 'Make fun of me.'" Greg threw a dirty sock at Hattie. "Leave him alone. If he likes to shop with his mom, he likes to shop with his mom." Hattie gave Greg a mock blow. "You make a point." He nodded towards Cyril. "This time for real. Sorry." "It's okay." In the silence that followed, Greg weighed how he was going to explain everything. Well, maybe he wasn't going to explain everything. Maybe just some things. For sure, he had to tell them about Fetch. He looked over to his nightstand, which held stacks of books, papers, and his phone, still receiving texts from Fetch. His most recent, an hour before Cyril and Hattie showed up, was, "Do you need food for a meeting?" "No, thank you," Greg texted back. He took a deep breath and wrinkled his nose at the scent of lavender air freshener his mom had put somewhere in his room. He'd been looking for it, but hadn't found it yet. He preferred the smell of his sweaty clothes, thank you very much. "Okay, there's no way to say this, but," he began. Cyril and Hattie looked at him. "Fetch has been sending me texts." His friends stared at him. They blinked in unison. "Who's Fetch?" Hattie asked. "Wait, you mean that dog thing? That prize from the pizzeria? Is this a joke?" Cyril asked. Greg shook his head. He picked up one of the stacks of papers from his nightstand. All the text messages he'd printed out. He held it out to Cyril. "Look." I can hear fireworks outside my window. My next door neighbors are shooting them off. He waited while Cyril and Hattie scooted together so they could read the text at the same time. "This can't be real," Cyril said. His voice was even higher than normal. Hattie grabbed a stack of printouts and flipped through them. He glanced at Greg. Who is calling me? This is not the time to be calling me. Okay. Hold on, I need a drink of water, guys. Okay. Okay. Hattie grabbed the stack of printouts and flipped through them. He glanced at Greg and then said to Cyril, "He wouldn't prank us like that." "No, I wouldn't," Greg said. "Want to see my phone? I'm smart, but I'm not smart enough to spoof text on my phone." Cyril shook his head. He abruptly stood and started panicking in a tiny circle on Greg's blue and maroon braided rug. "It must have synced with your phone, dude," Hattie said. Finally, Greg nodded. "Yeah, except—" "Whoa, wait," Cyril said. "I'm not a techie, but I don't see how something as old as that animatronic dog could sync up with a modern smartphone. It's just not possible." "Obviously it is, though," Hattie said. "It's just not syncing." Greg reached for the muddy plastic bag containing the spider and held it up. He felt like he would say Exhibit A, but didn't. "What's that?" Cyril shifted away so fast he fell on the bed with a thud. He fell off the bed with a thud. Greg suppressed a laugh while Cyril jumped up. "Sorry," Greg said. "It's not real." He told them the story of the picnic and the appearance of the unearthed bag on his doorstep. Cyril gaped at him and then looked from Hattie to Greg and back to Hattie. "No way." "Let me see that." Greg snatched the bag from Greg's grasp and examined it. "Those are teeth marks." "No way," Cyril repeated. "Way," Hattie said. "It's like my plants, I think," Greg began. It was time to share what he was sure was behind all of this. Cyril and Hattie stared at him. "What?" Hattie asked. "Have you ever heard of Cleve Baxter?" Greg asked, pretty sure they hadn't. They shook their heads. He was a polygraph expert who started doing experiments with plants in the 1960s. "Okay," Hattie said. "So what?" "So in the 1960s, Baxter had the idea to hook up a plant to a polygraph machine to see if he could measure how long osmosis took. Although he didn't learn a thing about osmosis, he stumbled upon something else, something super cool." Greg stopped. Cyril and Hattie were still staring at the spider bag. They probably weren't even listening to him, and even if they were, Greg realized there was no way he was ready to tell them his theory. "What if someone was in the building with us now and they're watching you?" Cyril asked, confirming that he and Hattie had been listening. "What, like a stalker?" Hattie asked. He bugged out my phone or something?" Greg asked. "That's just crazy." But was it any crazier than what he thought was going on? Greg's phone buzzed. He picked it up and read the incoming text. He dropped the phone on the bed. Hattie and Cyril looked from the phone to Greg. He pointed at it. They leaned over to look at the text. He looked at it too and read the text again. "EL." "What's EL?" Cyril asked. Hattie went pale. He met Greg's wide-eyed gaze. "Evil laugh," they said in unison. An animatronic dog that wanted to be helpful was one thing. An animatronic dog that wanted to be helpful and had a sense of humor was okay. But an animatronic dog who had an agenda, that was, well, scary. After that, Greg stopped trying to get Hattie and Cyril to understand what he thought was going on with Fetch. So they finished freaking out about Fetch's text. He told them he'd keep them posted and decided it was time to conduct more experiments. Going to the abandoned restaurant in itself had been a test, and he wasn't sure about how that turned out. It had started with him putting an intention out, a desire backed by his will that it unfold. He led to an impulse act. The impulse had taken him to the restaurant where he found Fetch. But how did Fetch play into the grand scheme of things? He had to figure it out. He decided to start with something small and specific. A generous person sent what? Wait. What? My brother. What's 100 dono? $100. 100 dono. What? I will probably check that here in a minute. Okay, hold on. Okay, so they're freaking about. Okay. I think I'm gonna stop it right there. So there'll probably be 3 parts to this. What should we read? Yeah, we read that much. I'm gonna figure out what's going on. But I'm gonna put our bookmark right there. We'll stop right there. And I will see you guys in what part would this be? Part 3. So yeah, I'm gonna figure out what's going on. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the little bit of Fetch I've read. So, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye! If I can figure out how to end it. Bye!